Order. If everybody would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Munt?
Present.
Mr. O'Dowd?
Present.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Regis?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Mayor Townsend?
Yes, ma'am. Is there any announcements?
Oh,
I have a few. You ready?
Do I have announcements?
no. No.
Okay.
Madam Vice Chair,
Yes.
one announcement. The September board meeting is scheduled, as always, at the same Thursday that we adopt the budget and the millage. And so that meeting will probably get moved to the following week, just to keep that sort of on your radar.
Okay. Okay, and I have a few announcements if everybody else. Okay. The item A under public hearings is going to be removed this evening and it'll be brought back at a later date. And out of respect for the residents that are here this evening so that we can move you through, we're going to be taking item I and J on the agenda and doing that first. If everybody's okay, is the board okay with that? Staff?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there any disclosures?
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I did speak to a representative of Ravinia on items I and J.
Any others? Okay. Review for approval of the minutes from the April 18th meeting.
Move to approve. Second.
Madam Secretary, call the roll. Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed? Okay, we're going to start with item I on the agenda.
Thank you. Good evening, Vice Chair Townsend and Planning and Zoning Commission members. Diana Waite, for the record, Senior Planner. I'll be presenting staff comments for the next two items, which represent concurrent application. Mr. Adele Nefsi is requesting a change in zoning from the agriculture residential zoning district to the institutional zoning district and a conditional use permit to allow for the establishment of a nonprofit cemetery in institutional zoning. Although these two petitions will require a separate vote, they will be presented and discussed simultaneously. Both items are quasi-judicial public hearings. Proof of the required public notice items may be found in your agenda. This map represents the responses to the public notice and the conditional use forms that were sent to the property owners within 500 feet of the subject parcel. A conditional use form is mailed to all owners within 500 feet for the purpose of determining whether or not a 4/5 vote by the Board of County Commissioners will be required for approval of the conditional use permit. The form includes three selections. One is to indicate whether they are in favor, not in favor, or have no opinion of the proposed conditional use. To date, staff has received 8 conditional use form responses in opposition of the proposed cemetery and 1 in support. I needed to update that to 10 conditional use, not in support, and 1 in support, and they're shown on the map. If the owners of 50% or more of the area within the 500 feet are in opposition of the petition, a 4/5 vote will be required for approval. Another public notice and conditional use form will be mailed to all residents prior to the Board of County Commission meeting. We also received a petition in opposition of the conditional use that is signed by residents in the area. Some of those petitions had also sent the conditional use form, and 5 of those owners were within the 500 feet of the property, and so we included them on the map as shown in blue because they have provided a written protest, which is the language in the code. The purpose of these applications is to allow for the establishment of a nonprofit cemetery on a 4.7-acre parcel located on the west side of Christensen Road, about 100 feet south of West Midway Road, a half a mile west of 25th Street. The subject site is undeveloped and consists of native pine trees, oak trees, cabbage trees, with existing uses surrounding the parcel include the Florida Center for Recovery to the west and south, single-family residential to the east, and vacant residential zone parcels to the north along Midway Road. The future land use designations surrounding the parcel are public facilities to the west and south, residential suburban, the same as the designated parcel. The subject parcel is found north along Midway Road. Residential urban, a slightly higher residential density, is found on the east side of Christensen Road. The zoning districts surrounding the parcel are institutional as being requested, AR1 to the north, and RS4 zoning to the east. To the southeast is a planned unit development zoning designation that was approved for the Ravinia PUD for single-family housing that has since expired. This picture is a view of the parcel from the corner of Christensen Road and Daniels Road looking north towards Midway Road. The subject parcel is fairly heavily wooded and vegetated. Based upon a conceptual site plan provided with a conditional use application, residents to the east would be separated from the proposed use by a 60-foot wide road right-of-way and a 25-foot buffer. In addition, the county's code requires a masonry wall or opaque wood fence at least 6 foot high between institutional zoning and residential zoning, unless a waiver is approved by the Board of County Commissioners. As staff has recommended several conditions of approval, including a requirement that the applicant obtain a minor site plan approval prior to the establishment of the cemetery. Minor site plans are administrative approvals approved by the Director of the Planning Development Services Department. In conclusion, staff has found that the proposed change in zoning is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies as set forth in the county's comprehensive plan and in compliance with the Land Development Code standards of review. With the proposed conditions of approval and the proposed change in zoning approved, we have also determined the proposed conditional use meets the standards of review. Staff recommends that both petitions be forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners with a recommendation of approval with the conditions cited in the resolution for the conditional use permit. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Does any board member have questions for staff?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Since we are hearing both of these simultaneously, the question I have is, I've got a couple of questions actually, since we're listening to both I and J, correct?
Correct.
I mean, are you going to do another presentation or that's it?
That's it, ma'am.
Madam Chair, if I could just for a moment. Engineering is here, and there are 2 conditions of approval that are changing, so can we just add that to staff comment?
We
At
can.
this time, we just found out about that.
Okay.
So if we could just have engineering come forward and address those issues before we...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I think the issue at hand, if I look to Leslie for confirmation, is related to Christensen Road and the need to pave. The county is getting ready to move forward with the widening of Midway Road between Selvich Road and 25th Street. Excuse me. Included in that work is a paving for Christensen Road, south all the way to Canal 103. The property in question lies within those limits, so the county will take care of the paving for Christensen Road. Make that clear, that's a funded project. It's the county's intention to move forward in January of 2014, which is 6 months from now. That will be included in the scope of work that we're going to bid with. And myself and the county surveyor are available to answer any further questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Well,
Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't think Ms. Morgan was finished.
I didn't get to ask my question.
Go ahead.
Yes, Ms. Morgan.
Okay, my questions are two. I have two, Mr. Lowndes. On the conditional use response form, I do notice that it does have there to return the form by May 19th. And I know that was, things happen, errors happen. The only thing that greatly concerns me is if they received this and probably thought, oh, it's too late, I can't respond. So was anything done to resend it, or?
We will be sending one prior to the Board of County Commission meeting. So no, we did have a few calls, and of course anyone who called was told to disregard the date and submit the form. And also that they would be receiving another form before the Board of County Commission meeting.
Okay. The other thing is that I can understand. I'm looking. I got too many papers up here. On I is for from AR to I, or to industrial, and then conditional use for a permit to do a cemetery. Now, and I may sound stupid, and that's okay. Conditional use permits are given as a conditional use and can be removed at any time.
No, ma'am. Conditional uses are, they're not a temporary permit. They are a permanent zoning approval unless there is a date in the resolution for some reason that would require it to expire. There is a 2-year, let me back up. There is a 2-year time period in all conditional uses. Once they meet the time period, then they, if they establish it prior to that time period, then they would be indefinite. The conditional uses just require another level of review in the zoning.
All right. It kind of got me because I know that we have taken back conditional use permits before or have put on additional restraints, and I didn't understand how we would be able to go back and do that since it was cemetery, because I wouldn't want to see, you know what I mean. Thanks.
Ms. Olson.
Madam Chair, Ms. Morgan, a conditional use permit can be revoked if the conditions of approval are violated. And so that would be the mechanism by which that would happen. And this, you'll see in the conditional use resolution, there are a number of conditions associated with this as well.
Madam Chair?
But that concerns me if you can revoke the conditional use permit and this is going to be a cemetery.
That would be messy.
That's a huge concern because I wouldn't want to be dug up. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
For clarification, the zoning changes to institutional, right, not industrial?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, did I say industrial? I'm sorry. I meant institutional. It started with an I.
Also, I just want clarification for myself. I'm also under the understanding in the conditional use that it can be revoked if for some reason they don't uphold their licensing of occupational licenses as well after a year. If it lapses, then they also can lose the conditional use. Is that correct? That's another stipulation on a conditional use, that they have to maintain their current licenses with the county?
I'll let
Madam Vice Chairman, yes, I believe that's correct. They have to have in place whatever in addition to the zoning that is required for that. So that's something that we could consider. And obviously, and I understand the concern about it being a conditional use, but that's what the code provides. It's not a permitted use. It does have allow us to attach conditions to it. And obviously, if you have a case where you're revoking something like a cemetery, there are going to be some special considerations applied to what might be done if it's necessary to revoke it.
Okay, thank you. Does the board have any other questions for staff? Yes, Mr. Mott.
Madam Chair. Staff, I noticed that the staff report says it's 4.7 acres and Land Design South's application letter says it is 5.15 acres.
Okay.
Can we determine whose survey we're using?
I will have to check the records.
Ma'am, that's very important. As I understand in the application, this has to be under 5 acres to apply for the exemption.
Yeah. Now, the application that I have says 4.7 acres. Where did you see the 5?
In Mr. Curry's letter,
Okay, that may have been, I have,
his letter of May the 10th says subject property located southwest corner, West Midway Christian. Subject property comprised of one parcel totaling 5.15 acres.
I believe that I have a boundary survey, and it also shows 4.7 acres. It could have been that number was taken from the property appraisers database or another source. It's incorrect. Our boundary survey and our application indicates 4.7, but we will follow up and verify that and have the application corrected if needed.
Absolutely. I mean, it's... Madam Chair, if I may continue.
Yes, sir.
I have some questions. First of all, I looked at the petition, and you said that the petition had been signed, but I don't think you stated a number. I counted approximately 20 signatures on the petition against.
I counted 22.
22. All right, thank you. I probably have some questions. Was there a meeting with the neighbors?
No, sir, there was not. We had recommended one, but one has not been held with the neighborhood.
So there's been no contact directly between the parties in question?
Not to my knowledge, no.
All right. I have a question that may possibly best be answered by the applicant unless staff asks the question. Is there going to be a trust fund for the maintenance of this property?
The applicant will need to address that question.
All right. In reading the state statute, 497-270, it said the minimum acreage of 30 is waived if the cemetery was in business before July 1st of 2001. Is there a different interpretation of this?
There is a section for exemptions for religious cemeteries, small religious cemeteries, as well as cemeteries for nonprofit organizations. And that is what the applicant has intended to operate this under. So they would be exempt from the state licensures, which would include the bonding and some of the typical requirements that go with the larger cemeteries. However, that's why we want a site plan, so we can get the layout, and they will need to meet any applicable standards of state regulations, as well as to provide a documentation from the state to verify that they are in fact exempt.
All right, well then we need clarification also on the 5 acres or less with some clarification either by survey. Did Mr. Harris look at this by any chance?
Yes, sir, he did.
Madam Chair, board members, Ron Harris, County Surveyor. Yes, Mr. Munn, I did.
Okay.
And the number on the survey will trump anything else. It was a field survey.
All right.
Okay.
And is the 4.7 correct in your opinion?
It would be accurate, sir. That is correct.
All right. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Does the board have any other questions for staff?
Yeah. If they haven't had any contact with the neighbors, and one of the requirements would be an 8-foot wall, and the applicant says that they intend to ask the neighbors to waive that requirement, and the fact that they haven't had any meetings with the neighbors, and the preponderance of the neighbors are not in favor of granting an exemption or change. I'm concerned, and if the neighbors are here this evening, I'm sure that they'll come forward and give us cause for their concerns. One of the questions that I would have is what type of marker is used to identify grave sites within this type of a cemetery?
Excuse me, were you asking about markers?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Typically, you have a gravestone or some indication of who the party is that remains are there.
Okay, oh, yeah, for the headstone, that would be a private matter that the applicant address. As far as I was thinking of survey markers and how the site's going to be laid out. Our county surveyor could address that.
Survey isn't what I'm interested in. It's how the
headstone.
grave sites themselves are identified.
Right.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Munt, really not an issue that we look at as part of the zoning, and so that would be something that would be more appropriately addressed by the applicant.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Yes, well, again, I guess it would be the applicant. I'd like to know what type of services would be conducted on the site.
Okay, so why don't we move, I'm sure the applicant has a presentation, and then at that time, we'll come back to see if the board has any questions before we open up for public comment. Is the applicant?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Brad Curry. I'm with Land Design South, representing the applicant, Adele Nefsi, tonight. All very good questions, and I did make notes, so hopefully after my presentation I can go quickly through the questions that were asked. I do have a very brief presentation. Diana did a great job going through most of the details. I just wanted to touch on a few of the other items. Again, the request before you tonight, there's two requests: rezoning from AR to institutional, and a conditional use permit for a private cemetery. Diana did a great job explaining where the property was, in between Selvets and 25th Street on the south side of Midway. Zoom in of the property, you can see that it is heavily wooded, native habitat on the property, which is good for my client. It's exactly what he was looking for. Future land use is RS. We have RU there to the east of us, and then public facilities to the south and west. Zoning, it's interesting that there is a substantial amount of institutional zoning along this corridor, both to the south, to the west, further to the west and to the north, and also a little bit to the east. The residential suburban land use designation does allow a development of up to 2 dwelling units per acre. That would result in approximately 9 dwelling units being on this property. So that would be the residential portion that could be developed on the property. As well as, this is your land use and zoning compatibility matrix. I know it's hard to read, so I did zoom it in. Those are all the zoning districts that are allowed in the RU zoning district. I'm sorry, RE land use designation, and RS land use designation. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. So the property does have the ability to be rezoned to any of those that are there. And I thought it was interesting that commercial neighborhood and also commercial office are an option for that property. So the institutional as well, and then you have your planned developments that are further to the bottom of that screen. Diana showed a picture of the site plan, and I've made it a little bit prettier here, showing the access road into the property off of Christensen Road. We do have the 2 fingers that go up to Midway. We aren't proposing anything on those. Those are about 7.5 feet wide. And really a loop road with a cul-de-sac there, or a roundabout there in the middle of the property. I think what's important is that the applicant is proposing to do a 25-foot wide buffer around the entire perimeter of the property. And my staff has already been out there, and we've done a GPS tree location map and located all of the mature trees in the perimeter of the property that are going to be saved. And then we actually did the next step where we went in and we looked at the trees in the interior of the site. And the county has a tree mitigation requirement that says that for every inch you take out, you have to keep an inch on the property. And just so that you guys know, we're able to meet all of our mitigation requirement just by keeping the trees in the perimeter of the property. So I think from a standpoint of when you drive by this property, it really won't be a whole lot different than it is today. The only thing that will be different is you'll actually clear out the exotics and actually make it a nicer buffer along Christensen Road. My client has been looking for a property for a cemetery for about 1.5 years now. And they've looked at properties in Fort Pierce, they've looked at properties in St. Lucie County, and they've had a difficult time finding the perfect property. Now, this property represents a good property for them. When they brought it to me, I went through and said, hey, you know, it's got the native habitat that you guys were looking for to provide a nice site. It's surrounded by institutional, and it seems to make sense. So we did decide to move forward with the zoning application, the conditional use application. And as you look around this corridor, the idea of this being an institutional property, being a cemetery, really makes sense with the vacant institutional there further to the west, Liberty Baptist Church there to the north. You have the Hospice Foundation a little bit further to the west, Castle Foundation, the Florida Center for Recovery, Midway Church, Midway Road Church a little bit further to the east. The Droughty Brothers, well, that's not institutional, that's more commercial office. You have an office basically across the street, a vet across the street, a vacant PNRD, and then another office piece. So when you look at the mix of uses along this corridor, I always tell the story that, you know, and it's been a while since I've told the story, but I used to say my 3-year-old daughter could do land use planning. If the colors match, then it seems to make sense. Though my 3-year-old daughter is now 13. So I think that when you look at the land use map and the zoning map, and you look at the existing uses, an institutional zoning district does appear to make sense on this property. Often we deal with zoning and conditional uses. I deal with them on a daily basis, and when I'm before a board such as this, the board will typically want to know, well, where is this use allowed by right? Or where can I develop this property as it is, or develop this use on a property without having to do this process, this conditional use process? Well, unfortunately, the St. Lucie County Land Development Regulations only allow cemeteries in the institutional zoning district. And even in the institutional, they're only allowed as a conditional use. So there's no place in the county that a cemetery is allowed by right. Every cemetery that is being proposed in the county has to follow this process. It has to either be institutional already, or it has to follow the conditional, and then it has to follow the conditional use process. So we're not asking for anything different than any other cemetery that comes before you guys. Neighborhood meeting. Mr. Munt brought up the neighborhood meeting, and I didn't have a neighborhood meeting. You can blame me on this one. When I looked at the zoning, it appeared to be consistent with what's around in the area. When I looked at the conditional use of a cemetery, I really honestly feel that there's no other use in the entire land development regulations that's as low as impact as a cemetery. So I didn't think that the neighborhood meeting would be required. And you guys know that I've represented some pretty controversial projects, rock mines, gas stations, drug and alcohol rehabs, and so I'll have a neighborhood meeting all day long. It's just I didn't expect to have one for this project. Didn't think it was going to be needed. So that's on me. There was the conditional use, the condition of approval that Mr. Pally came up to speak about. I just want to make sure that it's clear. It was for the conditional use staff report, and it was condition of approval number 6. Prior to the issuance of a zoning compliance, the developer shall construct Christensen Road to county standards from the project access point west to Midway Road, 2.2 West Midway Road. That is the one that they were talking about being removed, and we are in agreement with that being removed. There's a whole other approval process that has to occur after we get this conditional use and rezone, and that is with the state. The state does require all cemeteries to be permitted through them, and I just wanted to quickly touch on that. There are bonding requirements. If the conditional use for some reason or another is withdrawn for us not complying with it, then there is bonding in place that is required to maintain it and forever. And I actually have a copy of the 497-260 section of the Florida Code. And Mr. Mont, you had asked about the 5 acres versus not 5 acres. Well, the property is only the 4-acre number. The 5.15 acre number actually came from the property appraiser, and I have that here. And so I must have written that justification before I actually had the real survey. I was going off what the property appraiser said. And the property appraiser, as Mr. Harris stated, I believe, the survey is what you follow. But from trying to get things done, I probably just followed the property appraiser to get the justification written before I had the survey completed. But regardless, in my opinion, the 5 acres doesn't matter because Section 497.260 talks about exemptions from cemeteries. And it says, provisions of this chapter relating to cemeteries and all rules adopted pursuant thereto shall apply to all cemeteries except for, and then it lists A through I as exceptions to the requirements of this section. One of those is if it's less than 5 acres. One of those is also if it's a non-for-profit. So you don't have to be 5 acres or less, you have to be the non-for-profit. So we don't need to have that argument because we are less than 5 acres, but if we were over 5, it still doesn't matter because you have to, as long as you meet one of those requirements, you're considered exempt. We've checked with Florida, with the state of Florida. We've called them several times. My client has called them. We feel very comfortable that we'll be exempt based on our non-profit status. So if that, hopefully that answers your question. And you asked a lot of questions about how the markers are going to be set and all of that. You have to, my client is a nonprofit organization. They are on a budget, and they really need to get this conditional use and the rezone done before they really take that next step to start spending money on a surveyor to get those things laid out. That will be done as part of the site plan, and it will be done prior to actually going out and doing construction of the property. So those questions that you bring up, while we might not have the exact answers tonight, we are going to have those answers before we go out there and do the construction. Again, the first thing for this is a conditional use and a rezone. We have not made that next step to go and start actually laying out the grave plots. In summary,
Mr. Curry, if I could interrupt you for a minute on that
Yes, sir.
point. I think the concern that I might have is visually is typically a marked grave for these people. Are they headstones, or do they have mausoleums typically? Or, you know, I'm just trying to visualize the impact that it might have from a visual aspect of being around the property.
Mr. Munn, I would say that it's, I don't know that we're not proposing anything above ground. The Florida code does say that it has to be single level ground burial, so this is underground. So I don't think there's anything proposed to be above the ground. As far as headstones and those sorts of things, I'm sure that, you know, it's just going to be like just like any other cemetery. There's no restrictions at this point. I mean, I'm interested to hear if you thought maybe there shouldn't be headstones or anything like that. I mean, I just don't think we've gotten that far yet in the plan.
I'm just trying to put myself in the place of the neighbors and what they might have there. Okay.
I'll have the client come up, but I'm sure that I don't think they have gotten, or maybe they have. I'll speak with him and see if he has an answer. In summary, you know, I think that my opinion is, and you guys know I have a good opinion, or opinion about everything. Cemetery is perhaps the least intensive use in land development code. Native landscaping is going to remain in the first 25 feet around the entire property. These are mature oaks, mature pines, palms. I really consider it more like a park. It's park-like development. It's not housing. It's not commercial. It's not a drug and alcohol rehab center. It's more like a park than it is anything else. You know, the landscape areas that are there, the grass, the buffers are going to be professionally maintained. You know, it's not going to be like the neighbor across the street that doesn't cut their grass or doesn't doesn't trim their hedges. Those sorts of things. This is going to be a professionally maintained landscaped facility. There's really no traffic associated with this. When you compare to what could go on that property, the cemetery use generates probably the least amount of trips of any other use in the code. There's no lights. We're not proposing to have any lights on the property. No dust associated with the property. No persons allowed on the property after dark. There's really no noise associated with it. The conditional use as well is consistent with section 11.07.00 of your land development regulations. And the zoning is consistent with 11.0600. And lastly, we have staff approval. So in closing, you know, I actually live across the street from an institutional property as well. It has many of these same aspects as a cemetery. There's no noise. I love the landscaping. It's professionally maintained. There's no visitors there after dark, and I've never once had to call the sheriff to come and quiet them down. I think that the only difference is that across the street from me is an elementary school, and I have 500 cars twice a day coming to pick up their kids. And so from a standpoint of all the uses that are in the code that could go on this property and that will go on this property is eventually going to be developed. I think that the cemetery use is by far the least impact on the neighbors. That concludes my presentation. If you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Does the board have any questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Lowndes.
Mr. Curry, what type of buildings do you plan to have, or does the client plan to put on this property?
At this time, there are no proposed buildings. If there is a building, it may be a shed for some maintenance materials.
Can they put buildings on this property?
Not without, it has to be part of the site plan approval. It would be shown on the site plan.
Could they come back later and apply for a conditional change?
I can answer that, but I would also, if staff wants to answer it when I'm done. The site plan is something that's approved at a staff level, and as long as you meet the requirements of the code, I would assume that you could probably propose a building on this property once the conditional use and the zoning are granted.
That's correct. Commissioner Lowndes, Diana Waite, staff. At this time, they have no buildings proposed. The conditional use does not prohibit them from constructing buildings, so they could propose one on the site plan, but, conditions can be added to the resolution if you so desire.
And also, Madam Chair, members, if the change to the conditional use was significant enough, staff would have the option, I believe, to bring it back here for the Board of County Commissioners to review if it was a substantial change to, to what was originally permitted in the conditional use, and it would, substantially change those conditions. We would have the option of bringing it back to the board as well.
If we wanted to put a house of worship on this piece of property, it would definitely have to come back?
Yeah, I would be.
I would think so, yes. This is approving a cemetery, although...
That's a different use.
That's a different use.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Curry, I had a question about if there'd be a trust fund for maintenance. Do you have the answer? Or?
There has to be a bond put in place as part of this.
A bond is different than a trust fund. A bond is if the property were to be abandoned, then you could go against the bond. My question is there going to be a trust fund for the ongoing maintenance of the property?
I don't know if the trust fund's the correct term, but there will be a fund that's used that they're going to raise money just like any other nonprofit organization to do the maintenance of it. And if the money's not there, then they'll have to come out of their own pocket. I don't know if the trust fund's a term that I have not heard the applicant use.
How about reserves?
It's a separate organization. It's a nonprofit organization specifically for this cemetery. So I guess you can call it whatever you want to, but there will be a budget in place for them. There will be donations given to that organization for the maintenance, long-term maintenance of this facility. I'm sorry, I'm just not, Mr. Munn, if you could tell me what your concern is, I'm not sure I'm following.
I'm looking for a source of revenue that provides for the maintenance of the property. If it's just going to be, collections from the membership, or if they're going to go out and solicit, or
I think all of those things are the case.
If there's a large membership nationwide that they can make an application to a central church or a synagogue or whatever, mosque.
I don't know of any.
I'm just looking for sustainability.
Maybe you could compare it to the UDT museum. I mean, do they have sustainable, or do they operate just off of donations? I mean, that's what I'm thinking of it as. Any nonprofit is going to be out there hustling to try to get donations put in so that they can continue the maintenance of the project. I don't know if there's no bigger organization that's going to be giving this organization money, as far as I know.
All right, then that brings up the question: is the membership central only to this area, rather than being part of a nationwide membership, if you will, or church, mosque, whatever?
I think that the facility is associated with a local church, but I don't believe that. I believe that people of the nonprofit could be buried at this facility, whether they live here in St. Lucie County or whether they live somewhere else. But the majority of the folks that are running the nonprofit are associated with a church here in St. Lucie County. But they're two separate organizations. It's not like the church is going to be giving the nonprofit money. It's two separate organizations.
Okay, so the church is separate from the
Yes, sir.
operation
That's
of
correct.
the cemetery.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Diana Wade, planner. I'd like to clarify a question about the institutional zoning. In the religious facilities is permitted use under the institutional zoning district. So if the institutional zoning was approved on the property, religious organization could be built and located on the property. Pardon me? Right, they would have to go through the site plan process, but they would be subject to, just like any of the permitted uses, an institutional would be able to locate on the property.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Mott?
So under that interpretation, and Ms. Waite, is a house of worship could be built on the property then once it's changed in the land use?
Once the zoning is changed to institutional, one of the permitted uses is a religious organizations. That is a permitted use.
And that could be built without the conditional use?
Yes, sir.
All right, so if we change this, then a house of worship could be built on the property without going through a conditional use application. Is that correct?
Okay.
It only is going to have to go through the conditional use application if it's for a cemetery.
It's one of the conditional, one of the items under the list of conditional uses for the zoning district.
Which? The church or the cemetery?
The cemetery is.
I understand. So if it's changed to institutional, a house of worship can be built without a conditional use.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Madam Chairman, if I could just clarify, but if they did have the existing conditional use on the property and the site plan associated with that, they would have to address the fact that, you know, how is the church going to fit with that cemetery? And given the size of the property, I think you're going to run into some dimensional problems at that point. So.
Madam Vice Chair, I had a question, and unfortunately I can't pull it up quick enough here. Maybe
Okay.
staff will have it, the answer for me. Under the existing zoning district, is a place of worship allowed?
Yes, sir. Under the
Existing-
existing zoning district? No, sir.
Is it allowed as a conditional use under the existing? zoning?
No.
Okay. I thought that there was some federal law that said you couldn't stop where a church went. Am I mistaken on that?
No. We still have, I believe is that a membership organizations?
Well, the issue with where a church can go, you can have the zoning issues, and so that's how you would deal with it. Now you're talking about the religious relupa, or however it's pronounced. So you do have issues there, but as I understand it, you can still apply zoning and all your other regulations. You just can't treat it any differently because it is a religious institution.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Hearing none, this is a public hearing. We're going to open it up the floor for public comment. If you would like to speak, you need to come to the microphone, state your name, and you can come up one at a time.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Ursula Parrott. I live on 3180 Daniels Street. And cemeteries don't scare me, but the environmental part scares me. And I would like to have a question answered. How exactly are the corpses being buried? Because we're all on well water. And I think that's a pretty good question. Anybody can answer that for me.
I think he's coming up behind you.
Oh, good.
I never knew there would be so many questions about cemeteries. It's just like every other cemetery. They're going to be put in a casket and buried at the appropriate depth. And, I mean, there's no difference here. It's just like every...
I'm asking about Because I think we have in normal enough cemeteries, we're requested to embalm.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't know. I mean, this is regulated by the state, and we haven't, I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, we
so.
need to get it.
Okay. I'm sure, I mean.
That's it. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Anybody
Madam
else?
Chair,
Yes, Mr.
I
Odell.
believe a vault is required by state law.
That's my understanding.
Where a casket is involved now, not cremains. You're right.
I mean, everything is just like every other cemetery in the state, so, I mean, we're state requirements that we're having to follow, so.
You know, also for your presentation in the future, the vault is designed to completely enclose. You know, in other words, it's designed so that it could actually hold water, so that nothing would go, you know, below there into the ground.
Thanks for the input, Mr. Odell.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Adel Nevzi. I'm the one who's applying on behalf of this community. So I am in favor of that project. And concerning how we bury, it means it's the same thing. It's the same. We don't incriminate our bodies. It means it's the same thing. We make a big hole, we put the body inside, and we follow the state regulation. And I think the state regulation, we have to have a box, yes? And concerning the stone, we will use, it means like in, what's the name of the cemetery on the US 1?
Hillcrest?
Hillcrest, yes. We will put a stone where we will write the name. And the stone, it will be, means flat, with the land. And it will be grass around. It's the same thing. There is no difference.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak?
Good evening. I'm Rebecca Rivas, and I reside at 3191 Daniel Street.
Excuse me, can you move over to the microphone, please, so that we can hear you? Thank you.
You want me to repeat it?
If you would, just for the secretary, please.
I'm Rebecca Rivas. I reside at 3191 Daniel Street.
Thank you.
There's just too many unanswered questions for me. Mr. Curry stated that it doesn't make sense for rezoning, or it does make sense for rezoning, and to me it doesn't. That little neighborhood has been there. I've been in that area for 47 years, and we're slowly but surely getting squeezed in by all the industrial and commercial, and it just keeps going. And Mr. Curry also said he didn't think a neighborhood meeting was needed. What is that saying to the neighbors? And there's really no clear plans, or at least nothing they can tell us now as far as site plans, and it's all just messed up. And what is it going to do to our property values? Most people, I don't have a problem with a cemetery per se, but most people do not want to live close to cemeteries. You know, they think strange things go on. And also with the zoning, if they zone it institutional, like you said, does that mean that in the future they could just say, well, now we want to put a mosque or a church or change it to something different? You know, those are just some of my concerns that there's really no answers for. I think we do need a neighborhood meeting.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Mott.
The applicant is asking that a wall not be constructed, which would be required if they receive the conditional use. How would you feel about a wall versus no wall?
See, I'm not real sure about that.
Does it help, or?
Well, a wall isn't very aesthetic. We're surrounded by woods out there. It's beautiful. But then again, I'm not sure how much separation there would be with a buffer. You know, I guess it depends on the buffer and how tall it is and wide, and it's just kind of hard to determine without seeing something concrete.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Would anybody else like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Buffy Traylor. My address is 5040 Christensen Road. I live directly across the street from the proposed cemetery site. I have a large family. My daughter is expecting a child in the next couple of weeks. And we have actually considered whether or not we want this cemetery to go in, because my family is particularly the neighbor that is going to be impacted the most by this cemetery coming to our neighborhood. My husband and I have talked about it at length, and we are against it, whether there is a buffer, wall, regardless. Our neighborhood is a primarily quiet neighborhood. We like the way it is. We were hoping to see some housing go in there soon, but, you know, another issue we had was the public notice that went up. We didn't even know about it. We weren't told that there was even a cemetery coming in until 2 weeks ago when a surveyor came to our door looking for our well and our septic system. Now, my big question is if they are required to have a box, why is there a surveyor coming to my door looking to find out how far away my well water is from their proposed site? We were also researching their burial customs, in which they don't have a box. They bury their dead in a shroud. I have done my research at length. If I am wrong, I am mistaken, I apologize, but that is the research that I have come up with. They looked for every single well along Christensen Road, all three of our neighbors that face the cemetery. And they said they had to be so far away from the cemetery for our wells. Now, if it were a big impact and our wells weren't going to be an issue, then why did they have to be so far away from the cemetery if they use caskets or boxes? That's my big question. I also want to know why the public notice was put out on Midway Road and not where we, the residential neighbors, could see it.
Madam Chair? I'm curious about a surveyor going to the neighbors and posing the question about distance from the cemetery. Mr. Harris, do you have an answer on that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Mott, I do not. Okay. It is not any of our requirements. It may be something associated with the state. I am not sure. I just, perused the statutes, made the applicant aware of them that they needed to contact the state at a pre-application meeting. Normally, if you're going to build a home with a septic system, health department requires that. They do go on to adjoining properties to locate the wells and septics to be sure that the new wells and septics will meet the setback requirements from the existing facilities.
All right.
All right, sir.
Mr. Curry, did you folks commission a surveyor to ascertain the distance from the property to the neighbor?
Commissioner Mott, Dinah Waite, Senior Planner. One of the items in your resolution for the conditional use approval, one of the conditions, item number 1, requires a separation between the burial sites and surrounding wells. And that was a requirement that was cited to me from the Health Department Director. And so we've included that as a condition in the conditional use. So they were just out there verifying that that they could meet those distance requirements.
Okay. Mr. Curry, again, did you have a surveyor go out and ascertain the distances?
Yes, sir. We were requested to do that by the county, so we did contract with a surveyor to go out and do those locations.
Okay. And are the requirements met?
I have not seen the results of that survey information at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, my name is Carol Hunt. I have the property that is right in front of the 5 acres they're wanting to buy. Mine is on the corner of Christensen and Midway. It's the southwest corner. I have spoke to Mr. Adele, but I am 100% against it. That's just a community out there. Why would you want to build a cemetery in the middle of a community? And I also have well water out there. Even though I don't live on it, it's still well water out there. There's too many unanswered questions regarding a cemetery out there. I also think there is a need for a neighborhood meeting of the people that live in that vicinity.
I don't think they were in there.
My name is Shafiqur Rahman. I lead the congregation. I'm the imam. And I'm also a physician. I have a walk-in clinic on Virginia and Oleander since 2003. So I will address some of the concern. The first thing is that right now we have a cemetery in Vero Beach. Hillcrest cemetery, we bought a lot at the corner of that cemetery. And that lot is shared by Melbourne, Sebastian, Vero Beach, and Fort Pierce, all the way to Stewart. So, and that is in operation for the last 15 years. We have 25 graves there so far. So that, why I'm mentioning this, that there is not a lot of traffic, that the burial is like a big thick community, and the burial will be roughly on the average we have 2 burials per year. This is our average for the 15 years when we look at that thing. So there is not a lot of traffic involved. The second thing is that how will we maintain it? So in this, the people who are here, right, we have businessmen, very well-to-do people, 4 or 5 are physicians here, and it will be a shame for us that how can our children will not maintain our cemetery. So the community is professional, business people, and why will we not compliant with the code, and we will keep it in the excellent condition that what required by the state regulation. In Islam also, even if it is not the county, we are supposed to keep our neighbors happy. So it is not like you just go and impose your religion or your thing on your neighbor. There's a lot of consideration in our religion for the neighbor. But for my sisters, most of their concern is based on the phobia that we have everywhere. Like one of my sisters, she just says strange thing going on there. There's no strange thing going on there. We have Islamic Center of Fort Pierce for the last 25 years. And in the center, we pray 5 times a day. And you can see and so far you can go and ask the neighbor there around the mosque. We try to maintain a very good relationship with our neighbors, and we don't want to cause any problem for them. So the traffic is much more in the Islamic Center of Fort Pierce rather than the cemetery. And thank God that our neighbors, they are very happy from us. We try our best. The last concern regarding the well water and the way of our burial, so it is not a hidden thing. Anybody can ask the Hillcrest Cemetery that how we have been burying. So the thing is that in the Christian and Jewish religion and the Muslim religion, there are 80% similarities. We are not a whole lot different from the Christian. This is all because of the lack of knowledge and miscommunication and misunderstanding. So in our holy book Quran, the name of Prophet Moses is mentioned 130 times. And the story of Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, is there. So we are quite in accordance with the neighborhood, with the rule, with the regulation. And the Chamber of Commerce people, the community college people, they send their officers to our church, to our mosque. And last week, we have 30 delegates that they came, and we entertained them. We had breakfast with them. We give them a tour of our mosque that, look, what are the strange things going on here. We really want that everybody should stop by, come and see, so that there will be nothing in the mind that something is strange. So if anything, we will never want that their water will be contaminated. If it happens, we will withdraw ourselves. We will never want any harm to anybody. But if there anybody prove that something is, we can look for another land. But it is not true, because when you go on the internet, that is not the right way. The right way is the concrete thing. Called Hellcrest Cemetery, that they have been burying their dead bodies there for 15 years. How they do that? So they will tell you that it is only the shroud and the things are coming, you know. So all these concerns, they are just based on a phobia, that strange thing, and nothing different. It is just like a cemetery. And Mr. Murphy has been helping us several lands, and just because of this thing, we are not successful, that the people think what we're going to be doing here. Several attempts fail. Like, for example, we applied for a land, and it was on the market. The minute they know that it is a Muslim cemetery, next day they withdraw from the market. So we are citizens, and we are legal people of this area, and we have birth and we have death and we have all our needs here. I have 7 children, and I have been working in this area since 2003, and I try myself to be as beneficial as possible. So we are just coming across with this problem, but I assure my neighbor that we will not cause. We are bound by our religion, and if somebody is doing it, he is doing it wrong. But in the pages of the Holy Book, there is nothing as harming or teasing or giving any kind of trouble to your neighbor. We will never do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So in summary, what he's saying for the neighbors, yes, we are ready for a meeting. If you have any questions, we will come to you, or you come to our church, which is on Midway, and any questions you have, we will answer your question. Thank you.
Just, Madam Vice Chair, if I could just discuss this condition number 1, just to put it in perspective. The state is what requires that surveying of the wells, and it's public wells within 100 feet. Now, again, that's public wells, and private wells within 75 feet. Just so I can keep that in perspective, Christensen Road is going to be a 60-foot right-of-way. We're proposing a 25-foot buffer, so we're already 85 feet away from the property line on the other side of the street. So from what I can tell, it was just something that's required as part of the site plan, but it doesn't look like it's going to impact our property. Maybe along the north, if there's a public well along the north property line, but anything on the other side of Christensen's going to be a minimum of 85 feet away from where our graves are going to be. So thanks.
Madam Curry, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Lowndes.
Mr. Curry, share with me and the board a little bit in the search process to find a place for the cemetery, for the mosque. My concern is the location of the cemetery at this time. There are several private cemeteries. There's one on Okeechobee Road between 11 Mile and McCarty. You wouldn't even know it's there. There's one on Indrio Road, just west of US 1. They are not in amongst future commercial development, nor are they in an area that has traditionally been quiet, rural neighborhoods. Why this piece, and could we not have found something, a piece of property further west?
Mr. Lowndes, forgive me, but you said that you wanted something that you didn't want a cemetery in a rural neighborhood, and now you're saying you want me to go west of town. So I'm having a hard time understanding that. But the property, they've looked at properties along Tumbling Clean Road in Fort Pierce. They looked at 2 properties there that I know of, but I knew that they were looking, and that's east. They did want something close to their existing mosque that's associated, that's a part of it, and that's not, they're 2 separate organizations, but they wanted something in the Midway Road area to be closer to where their mosque is. So I mean, Adele can come up and give you the long-winded of everything that he's looked for, but I think it's something that they wanted to have as part of their own membership, and this piece of property has shown itself. And I would say that, it is in a future area. I mean, they're four-laning Midway Road from 25th Street to Selvets, and then the state's four-laning it from 25th Street to US 1. There is commercial uses in the area. This piece is going to be developed. And I think that from a standpoint of if I were a neighbor there, what I want there, I mean, the option of keeping it as it is really shouldn't be on the table. So, whether a cemetery is better in a rural area or better in an urban area, I can remember when I was going through graduate school, professors said back in the olden days they put cemeteries right in the middle of town so that when you walked by it, you remembered the people that came before you. And I happen to like that idea. I think that's a good idea, to put it right where everybody walks by it. The more people that can see it, the more you can honor your history. So I think it's tough. I think that this is a piece that meets their requirements. It's a piece that's surrounded by other institutional zone property. It has the ability to be buffered significantly to where it looks like a park from the surrounding properties, and it seems to make sense. So that's the reasons before you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Curry.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. O'Donnell.
Mr. Curry, another quick question here. It seems that we have a health concern from some of the neighbors. Is there anything non-traditional about the burials that will occur?
No, sir. Like Mr. Netsky told you, that he's currently being they're currently being buried up at Hillcrest, which is a facility that's state controlled, and so it'll be exactly like other state cemeteries. So,
but will it require casket and vault?
Yes, sir. That's correct. That's what they're doing in Hillcrest.
Okay, the public is still open. Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
My name is Assam Al-Turk. I live in 932 Southwest Grand Reserve. I'm in favor of this project. I think the neighbor should be happy to have something, it's like a park instead of having a building. And as we discussed, all the zoning, all the surrounding areas are institutional. You have a lot of buildings, you have a drug rehab center, so you can have that next to your home, so I think a cemetery will be a better option. People will be dead in peace. There'll be no noise or nothing, so I'm in favor of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
Madam Chairman, members of the board. Mr. Curry pointed out that my yard is unmowed, and that's because I've been really sick for the last month. And my son decided to use my lawnmower to go four-wheeling back in the canal area, so it's getting repaired. But as Mr. Curry also pointed out, he didn't think there was a reason to bring this up. Now, if you look at a map of this site, and you look at the Midway Road side of that map, you'll see that on the
this map.
part that goes towards the, I guess the best way I can do it is to just show you. This part right here. That is where the sign was placed for the notice of what was going on today and with this. It wasn't placed across the street from our house where all my neighbors could see it. If I wanted to be good with the community and I wanted to put something in, I would go in and talk to the neighbors that were going to be there for me, and I would explain to them what I want to do, and I would try to release their fears and make it something positive, and I would post it right out in front of them. I wouldn't try and hide it or be deceptive about it. Now, I can't guarantee you that that was deceptive, but there is no property that they're going to be using out on Midway. And I just don't think that if you want to be good with your community that you try and sneak something in. And it gives the appearance of that, whether or not it was intended for that, it gives the appearance of that.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Martin.
I couldn't see exactly where the gentleman was pointing to. Could I get that clarified where the sign was located? Was it not on Christensen Road?
No, sir.
No,
It was on
Midway Road.
Right there, where, did you see the pointer over here, Mr. Mont? Look.
Well, was it on the property and
Well,
was it
again,
on the property or
for the
not on the
record, Brad
property?
Curry's Land Design South. I was the one that posted that sign in the pouring down rain about 3 weeks ago. And I post signs all over this county for my projects, and I wanted to put it on Midway Road. The closest I could get was right here at this property line. And so, yes, sir.
That doesn't show up on my screen,
Yeah.
Mr. Curry.
Show it.
I don't know. I don't have any pointer to show you.
Anna, can you put a pointer on it for us, please?
Right there along that finger that goes up to Midway Road.
So it wasn't posted on the property?
That's the property.
There's
Those two fingers are part of it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's another map that shows a better gapping of those red lines in between those two properties. There. I don't know what the width is.
7.5 feet.
7.5 feet. Those
About.
two fingers that come up. Sorry to interrupt.
Typically, Mr. Munn, I like to post the signs on the roadway that has the most traffic. So it was nothing disingenuous. There was no intent. The neighbors do get a notice. This is not their only notification of this. They get a certified mail notice, I believe. It's not.
No.
It's not certified. It's just regular mail. And the property owners do get a letter stating about this within 500 feet. So
are the properties on Midway Road also a part of this parcel then?
it's just the two fingers, Mr. Mont, that go up, 7.5 feet wide. It's, for some reason, they circle that one piece, but it's not. That one piece is not it. It's just the boundary, the darkened boundary. Does not include the two parcels that are front on Midway Road.
All right, so they do not have frontage on Midway Road.
They have two 7.5-foot arms on Midway Road.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions for staff when we come back.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Dr. Hussein Mustafa. I'm an emergency physician right here at Lawnwood, right behind this building. I am a member of this Muslim community. I do think it would be a good thing for this community. As a Muslim community, we also do have needs, and I do understand that what the neighbors' needs are, property issues as far as depreciation and things like that. I am in favor of this project, and on behalf of the Muslim community, I do apologize that not a better effort was done to reach out to you. That will change. We will try to establish something where we can post a meeting or have a meeting where we can try to answer more of your questions, because I'm sure you're going to have more questions to come. But again, my name is Dr. Mustafa, and I am in favor of this project. Thank you.
My name is Waleed Mustafa. I'm not related to Mr. Mustafa here. Good friend of mine, though. I live right up the street on Kukui Court, and I've been there since 2003, excuse me. And I would love nothing more than to see a cemetery go up instead of another building or club or a gas station or anything of that sort. I think the cemetery would be the ideal place to have, and it beats anything else out there. Just quiet. So.
Thank you. Anybody else?
This is my first time speaking to any board, although I served in your position in the past in St. Lucie County. Mr. Munn, my name is Akhtar Qureshi. I'm a businessman for 40 years in this community. I guarantee you, any of the members here, and I totally agree with my leader here, very peaceful people. I have mediation with judges. I have recommended in my 40 years about getting people out on the mayor request. I have recommended chief of police, the sheriffs. They're peaceful people. I guarantee you never been arrested. And also, we are member of this community, serving very well in St. Lucie County. I have provided, or God has provided, around 10,000 jobs in this community. That means something. We live here, we never leave, and I just supported this because I'm getting old, I'm going to be buried somewhere, and I don't want to go to Miami. So if I pay my dues and taxes and serve the community well with every organization you name, some of the board member knows it, and that's all I have to say to clarify your situation that you're asking, and I'd be glad to talk to you and tell you what we do. I don't want to take, Heather is one. She's sitting here as an attorney. I was the chairman in St. Lucie County, Chamber of Board, Arts Council, everything you name it, Indian River Community College, free, for free, 5 years coaching, bring nationwide reputation. So there's a lot more to do. I don't want to bore you, but I'd be glad to sit down with you and explain you what we do here. Thank you very much for all of you.
Thank you.
So I think it will take very long if everyone here will stand and they will say his name, and all these people, they approve the project. Maybe 3 more people. We want to show you the kind of community we are. So there are plenty of doctors, pharmacists, engineers. I'm personally director of drug discovery. I work at Torrey Pines. I spend more than 50 hours a week looking for drugs to treat Alzheimer's, to treat cancer, to treat new analgesic. So we are a productive community. That's what we are trying to show you. We will not ask everybody here to talk. We will ask maybe 3 more people. Doctor.
Okay, can I just ask real quick, because if it's going to be the same thing, I think it would be easier if we could just have a showing of the hands of those that approve, unless you want to add something else, so that we can move forward. Is everybody in agreement to that?
That will be okay, just to mention the title, doctor.
If you have something else that's not been said, then that's fine. We want to hear you, but
okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Yes, we go for it.
Now, would you like to say something?
My name is Salah Gate. I am a consultant pharmacist here in this community, helping the community over 18 years. I'm pretty sure we will never break any rules or any code of conduct or anything here in this community. We follow the burial way exactly the same like anybody else, and we will address anything. Anybody has any question, we'll assure the people that we will never do anything to hurt anybody feeling at all. So we cannot live in a community and somebody doesn't like something we do at all. So we will make sure 100% that everything will be okay.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Rivers. Is that going to only have one driveway? Well, you know, in and out and one exit?
Can staff answer that?
Yes, that's what's proposed at this time
Just one exit?
in the concept
And then
plan.
the 7 foot, that's a right of way off of Midway?
But that will not be used for access.
Right.
And it's not wide enough, so that would not be allowed. They have their driveway fairly close to the northern property line, to the north, the northern property line.
I thought that everything that you built or opened supposed to have 2 exits. You know, I thought, because I'm under construction.
And that is, a lot of times the fire department does want an emergency exit. That's because this is a cemetery that may be different, but the fire department has not looked at this plan as yet, so that may come, that may come up at a later date when we review the site plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, would anybody else like to come up at this time? If not, we're going to close the public hearing. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say?
I'd like to just, after it's all over, if I
Let's
could
just
come
see
up.
if there's anybody else who would like to speak, and then I'll have you close.
I wasn't sure if I could talk again. My name is Steve Traylor. I live at 5040 Christensen Road. My question is, now that they have established that there's 2 fingers that extend out to the road there, can they later on apply for a second conditional use permit and rezoning of that piece of property and the two pieces of property, both of those pieces of property, and then per se maybe install a mosque in that area too. And the reason I ask this is because traffic to me is a big important impact in neighborhoods. Now you may have one exit and it may be closer to going from that exit up to Midway, but how many of them are going to follow that when they're wanting to hurry up and get out and follow it around that kind of horseshoe to go out on Virginia, I believe, is the other street over there. And I just think that there's so many questions that we really need to have answered, because I'm in the process of negotiating with the landlord on this property to purchase it. And I don't want to buy a piece of property and then in 5 years find out that they're building a mosque across the street and they're going to be playing music or there's going to be a heavier traffic load. I mean, I'm just like everybody else. I want to live and get along with my neighbors, but there's limitations on what that is. The same for me, you know. And so I think those issues need to be addressed too.
Excuse me, Mr. Trailer.
Yes.
What piece of property are you referencing that you're interested in purchasing?
The one right straight across from their driveway.
All right, thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that has anything else that they would like to say at this time, that the public hearing is still open? Sure, come on up.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and member of the board. My name is Arif Parupia, and commonly known as Pete. I've been here probably the oldest citizen of this community. Some of you know me, and I've served in many committees, including the Code Enforcement Board in the city of Port St. Lucie. I live right there in the county on the city side. We are a participating community, and we are growing. I moved here just before Mr. Qureshi moved here and went to the college here in 1971. We are peaceful and abiding citizens of this community. I do volunteer work for the city of Port St. Lucie as a volunteer police. We need the place for us to have a burial. We do not play music. We're not allowed to play music, whether in the cemetery or in the mosque. It's very quiet. You would not hear unless we are just doing a prayer, which is very calmly done, followed by one person who is going to lead the prayers. I favor the cemetery because it's so close to where we are. We have time limit for our dead people to be buried. And we have to comply with the state law. So I would like you to consider we are open, like our Imam said, our leader, we're open to talk to anyone that wish to have questions, because like there are a lot of misconceptions, misunderstandings. We are always open. We pray 5 times a day. We will make arrangements for the meetings, and we will answer any questions. I hope that they will understand what we are talking about. So I would like you to consider and give us an approval to have a place where we can rest. Thank you.
Anybody else like to make a statement?
I just would like everybody to know I don't have anything against that community. What I'm worried about is the environmental impact, and somebody really needs to look into that and give me a clear answer on that. I don't have anything against the people, I don't have anything against the religion, but I want to know what happens with the environmental part. And that's all I'm worried about.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Lowndes.
Mr. Satterley, is there any way that we could answer that question by in the future, maybe asking the health department to check the state regs? It's my understanding that to have any burial, private or otherwise, it has to be done in a watertight, concrete, approved, sealed vault.
Madam Chair, Mr. Lowndes, that's my understanding of it, but that's certainly something that we'll wrap up, and have the definitive answer, if, when this goes to the Board of County Commissioners.
Whether it's a body or ashes, it has to be in a concrete, approved, watertight, sealed vault.
As far as I know, yeah.
But I think that would help the folks here answer that environmental question. And I understand their concern. Thank you.
And I did want you to know for the record that we did advise Mr. Curry that he should have a neighborhood meeting, and I would advise him again to follow up and have that meeting. And I think that this is exactly why we do that, so that when we come to these hearings, that it lessens the likelihood that you have this sort of conversation, that people that come are then informed. They may not agree, they may not like it, but at least they're better informed about what's being proposed.
A lot of good comes with apple pie and ice cream.
And cheese.
Cheese. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we're going to close the public hearing. And before we go to the board, if you would like to address any concerns or issues.
Thank you, Vice Madam Chair. I represent a lot of projects, and the approval process is a long and tenuous and expensive process. For a project like this, again, it's the rezone, conditional use, minor site plan. These things take time, they take money to get through the process. So a lot of the details that you guys are looking for right now, they cost money. We know that they're going to be addressable. We know that there's restrictions in place to make sure that we do the things correctly. There's the state laws, there's the site plan requirements, there's Mr. Harris is looking for some sort of plat or something to show where these places are going. Those things are going to get taken care of. But the details of it, to dig into it at this point, would be a significant amount of money for a project that we don't even know if we're going to get approval for yet. And we often struggle with that in my profession. How much money do we spend up front, and how much investment do we get for a project that potentially, 3 or 4 months down the line, and sometimes 6 to 8 months down the line, we don't get the approval for. And so I can assure you that there's state requirements that we have to follow. Staff has said that from day one. We are in touch with the state. We've talked with them. They won't even accept our application until we get the zoning and conditional use done. The state won't even look at us. They don't want to waste their time on us until we have these applications in place. So I'm telling you this because I know that it appears to the residents that we don't have answers to all these things, but it's so early in the process here that it's difficult to have all those answers. Just wanted to make sure that everyone here that's in support of this application, please raise your hand, just to make sure that we get a good total of who's here in support. I think that you can, there's been talk about other uses on the property, and my client would be willing to have a condition of approval under the conditional use application that says that this property is limited to a cemetery use only, and any additional uses would require the Board of County Commissioner approval. So we would be willing to have that as a condition of approval on the conditional use application, which crosses out any concerns that the neighbors and the board may have that another use gets put in here once we get the institutional zoning. So again, we would be willing to have a conditional use, or a condition on the conditional use application that says cemetery use only, any other use shall be approved by the Board of County Commissioners. About the access, I did submit to the fire district. I submit all my applications to the fire district, and I submitted to them on May 13th, 2013, and have heard no comments back from them. The 2 access point is typically for something that generates a lot of trips, something that has a lot of people coming and going. They don't want to bottleneck at one access when they have to go in and save someone down there. This is a cemetery. We don't expect to have that many trips coming and going, so the 2 access points is not going to be required for this use. So just wanted to clarify that. I think I'm done now, unless you guys have any other questions.
Madam Chair.
I appreciate your time.
Yes, Mr. O'Dell.
Mr. Curry, I concur about the low impact. But are we safe to say that there are no sanitary or health issues?
Yes, sir. My understanding is the state requires that. I mean, they can't have a cemetery that's state approved that allows for any kind of liquids or anything else to come out of the casket. So this is a state.
I'm looking at that now.
And so this is a state approved, and the casket and the concrete enclosure around it are sealed.
Any other questions from the board?
I have comments. No.
Is there any staff questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Mott.
Staff, can you briefly tell me what's going to happen on Midway Road from 25th to Selvets? We're looking at widening. Are we looking at some eminent domain of right-of-way and that sort of thing?
Good evening. Again, for the record, Mike Cowley, County Engineer. Excuse me, Madam Chairman, Mr. Munt. The county intends to four-lane fully the roadway between Selvets and 25th Street. Dedicated turn lanes. There'll be a median in there that will provide access at some locations. Can I answer maybe a more specific question for you?
Mr. Pollard, what do you see with the properties that are north and adjacent to this property? Are they going to lose some of their frontage? What might happen in there?
Yes, sir. It's the county's plan primarily to widen to the south. Additional right-of-way will be needed. We will be widening to the south. There are some homes to the east of this property that we have purchased already. There's a field office that we'll use temporarily. As you get closer to Virginia, there are some other properties that we need to acquire. We do not have all of it, but the right-of-way will come from the south side.
Approximately how much right-of-way do you think you'll require?
I would yield to the county surveyor on that number. I think it's on the order of about 30 feet, but he can jump up here if I'm wrong.
Madam Chair, Mr. Mott, the right-of-way varies per location. In some cases, could be as much as 55 feet of strip taking. In some places, as little as a little corner clip.
All right.
Okay, sir.
Thank you very much.
We also have Canal 103, which was dedicated to us by North St. Lucie District, which we're also utilizing as part of the right-of-way area.
All right. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments?
Madam Chair, I have a few comments and questions and all kinds of information, and I don't even know where to begin. The sign that was placed on Midway, and I have to tend to agree with that, putting it on there. I know you wanted to get more exposure out there, but then again, the people that live across there, what is the time frame that the sign has to be up?
10 days prior to the hearing.
All right, so it was up 2 weeks, 14 days. Because I'm the same way. I kind of go past them if it's something that I'm not really concerned with, which actually I should. Okay, that's answered. The next question, is Pete Perupia still here? Oh my gosh, I mean, we go way back. We got to talk later. You've got a lot less hair than you did before when I saw you like 20 years ago. Nice to see you. The leadership, I know that one of the gentlemen got up and they did a visitation to the mosque, and that was the leadership class with the St. Lucie County Chamber of Commerce, and I have to give kudos to them. I was in leadership 22, the best class that there ever was and will be, but our religion class on that day, the mosque was not available, and I really was so upset because I wanted to go and learn more. And I thank you for doing that to give us more information. The biggest thing that I want to say to Mr. Curry, shame, shame, shame on you. I know that you assumed, and we all know what happens when you assume, that you did not have a meeting with the neighbors. And I know that we had mentioned this a year ago or years ago, that we were going to require or strongly suggest that you meet with the neighbors before you bring a project like this to us. And I think this meeting probably would have been done by 6:30 if that had been done. I am concerned, I'm like this. I think it's a lot of misinformation that we have, not knowing about the religion. I think it's interesting to learn more. There's a stigma out there, unfortunately, which is our fault, everybody's fault on both sides. I'm concerned about the wells, why a surveyor would be coming to my house. That concerns me. There's no report from the surveyor. I'm upset about that. no meeting with the neighbors. I'm looking at the no's and the yeses. I do recognize that none of the commercial properties within that 500-foot responded. So that is interesting. I don't know if they get sent the same notification that residents do. But according to my numbers, there were 16 against, 1 for, 3 with no response, and 11 commercials. So I don't know if the commercial corporations get notified the same as the residences. That concerns me. One last thing, and then I'll hush, and I hope not to speak again. The one last thing is, I know that we had mentioned this in past years also, Mr. Satterley, or to legal or to staff, that, and it was many, many years ago, that we did not like it when it posted on there the date for the board meeting. Now, what concerns me is that this is like trying to get pushed through, and it's only 7 days, 7 business days until the next board meeting. You're talking about a week of a holiday week, and it's posted on there for July 2nd, and personally I don't think that's enough time to orchestrate a neighborhood meeting, to make sure to give them ample notice, to make sure that they're there so that they can have questions answered, to have the survey reports. I would wish that you would withdraw and come back at another meeting to provide us more information, because I would like to hear what the neighbors have to say after they've met with you in regards to the wall, the fence, the buffer, how good the apple pie was, because a lot of it is information that wasn't given to the neighbors, and I really feel that that would have helped tremendously in this, and especially with the report not from the surveyors and everything, and then going to the commissioners within 7 business days. I am totally against. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair, and it's a holiday week. So I'll shut up now. Thank you.
Vice Chair Townsend and Board Member Morgan. My client's got the piece under contract, and he has a certain amount of due diligence time, and that's the reason that it's somewhat rushed. I agree with you with the that I screwed up by not having the neighborhood meeting.
I didn't actually say that, but
but the problem is, let's just say that we postpone and we come back before you guys next month, so that'll be July. You'll have the same issue next month because there's only one Board of County Commissioner night meeting a month, and so the P&Z meeting and the County Commission meeting are going to be fairly close. Now, there won't be a holiday between this one and the next one, but so then we go from a July 2nd approval to, I guess it just postpones us a month all the way around. And I think we're willing to do that. I mean, I think we're willing to have the neighborhood meeting, but I do feel, and maybe I'm partial to this, but I do feel that the answers were given tonight, that there's not going to be any seepage out of this, that they're sealed tight, that we're doing a 25-foot buffer, that it's low traffic. I mean, all these things. Now, the wall versus not having a wall, that's something that we can determine after we get through this. But if it's the board's decision that they would like to postpone us and have us go to a neighborhood meeting and come back in July, then we're willing to do that. But it just, it becomes a contract negotiation with the property owner and my client, and he has to get more time at this point in order to close on the property, which I know you guys will never see that, but it is a component of this whole deal is to the contract that's on the property. So that's the reason the schedule that we have. So not that has any bearing on what you guys decide, but that's the reason it's the schedule that we have.
And thank you for that. And I think it would be in the best interest, and I'm sure that the owner of the property, 30 days because of the holiday and coming before us and only one night meeting a month now. But I think for the neighbors, it's like me, when I first saw this, I'm thinking, wow, a cemetery, that's low impact. You don't have to worry about parties at night. It's very quiet. There may be some superstitions. I'm concerned about the environmental that was brought up because it scares me about the surveyor coming out. That would scare me. But I think it's just a lot of misinformation. I would strongly suggest just postponing 1 month and then coming back, and you'd probably have all these neighbors in support.
Again, if that's the direction of the board, we would be willing to do that.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
Madam Chair,
Staff? Yes, Mr. Lowndes?
I understand Ms. Morgan's concerns, but I think most of the questions have been answered for me. For the environmental issues, I understand the state's position. The question I have to ask myself, if this was a request from the White City Methodist Church, how would I feel? If this was a request from the synagogue on Oleander, how would I feel? And I take that to heart. 30 years of law enforcement, I only went to a cemetery request one time for a disturbance, and it wasn't the people that lived there. The people that were creating problems there. If I lived across the street from this, I'd much rather see the peaceful quietness of a cemetery than I would another doctor's office or something on the side road, which they could do. Less traffic with these, with the cemetery. I think we were looking at 3 or 4 burials a year, average. I don't have a problem voting on this tonight, one way or the other.
Any other comments? Does staff have anything else to say?
No, ma'am.
Would somebody like to entertain a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to just make a comment before there's a motion on the floor. And looking at this with the amount of institutional property that is nearby to it and the amount of buffering that could be created between the east and west sides of Christensen Road. You know, I drive through the communities all the time, and sometimes I wonder, you know, what's over there if, you know, it's properly buffered. And certainly once you get beyond the buffering, a well-maintained property, I'm not sure what they have in mind, but low-level markings or stones of some sort with the name engraved, where you don't have a lot of large headstones and things that stick up, that sort of thing. And again, with the proper buffering, and the neighbors could or could not feel comfortable about a wall, but certainly a vegetative buffering, you know, would be something that I think could be pleasing to the eye. Looking at the proximity to Midway Road, I see, you know, residential for, you know, property there, you know, facing right on Midway. And, you know, you're going to have a lot more problems with traffic and things that, you know, could occur off of Midway than you would with being across the street, you know, from a cemetery. My inclination is that I would support this. It's unfortunate that the neighbors weren't included prior to getting to this point. I agree with Mr. Lowndes. I think most of the questions have been asked and addressed for the most part tonight, and a deferral. I don't think that we would see much change one way or the other. Possibly some of the neighbors might feel differently after a neighborhood meeting. I wish that had been aired earlier, but it wasn't. But I don't sense that there would be a significant amount of change of heart. I am a little concerned about the preponderance of neighbors who are concerned about it. When you get a 10 to 1 against in the responses, and then a petition with 22 names signed to it, it certainly is a preponderance of the nearby neighbors' concern. But looking at the potential, when you've got halfway homes and rehabilitation facilities nearby with the potential that those bring into a neighborhood versus a cemetery with nice vegetation and properly maintained and that sort of thing. I know what I'd feel more comfortable with in my neighborhood. So if somebody makes a motion, I will be in support of the change. Madam Chair?
Okay, I would just like to briefly state my opinion on this. I too do believe that in the future, nothing should be assumed. And I think that as a resident of this community and taxpaying, they are entitled to have a neighborhood meeting with any zoning change brought before this board. So I hope that you will please consider this as a lesson and not let that happen again, because I think it's vitally important for the neighbors to voice their opinion and let their opinions be heard, and then a lot of this could have been avoided. I too think that there is a lot of miscommunication with society, and had the meetings occurred, a lot of their answers would have been there. And I agree. If this was coming in my neighborhood, I would want it too, because it's going to be quiet. So I just hope that if this does move before the board this evening, that before it gets to the Board of County Commissioners, that maybe you could take the time to meet with some of these residents so that when it goes to the Board of County Commissioners, a lot of their answers will be answered. That's all I'm going to ask at this time. So if anybody would like to entertain a motion.
Madam Chair?
I did have one more question before you make a motion, Mr. Odell and Madam Chair, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Oh my gosh. Oh, what was mentioned earlier, at a senior moment there, and I'm only 39. You had mentioned several times, Ms. Waite, during the presentation that there were conditions, and I see absolutely no conditions in my packet unless I'm blind. Maybe I need to put my glasses back on. But could you point out where the conditions were and what they were?
Yes, they're in the resolution, which is behind the staff report in your packet. I'm sorry, for the conditional use. The conditions are in the conditional use.
So that's J.
And it starts on page 2 of the resolution.
Page 2 of the resolution. Oh, because usually they're put under the recommendations. It's the recommendations of approval with the following conditions, and that's what I wasn't sure of.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Olson.
Ms. Morgan, members of the board, Leslie Olson for the record. Ms. Morgan, you brought up before the concern about the conditional use and being revoked and it being a burial site. So I did take a look at the conditions within the conditional use resolution quickly. Some conditional uses have conditions attached to them that are ongoing. No loud parties, those kinds of conditions, like we had for Mud Jam. Those are the types of conditional uses that get revoked because of the conditions, because they're ongoing and they have to keep complying with those conditions. Every one of the conditions within the conditional use resolution must be complied with prior to the cemetery becoming functional. So it would not come back before this board for revocation if they met all of these conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to say that, I've had the opportunity to assist and go to the mosque and actually met with the imam. So I definitely have seen that the religion itself, or the mosque itself, is definitely peaceful. If this was coming to my neighborhood, and I know if we've said this, I would definitely be open to this. So I do recommend that we do move to moving this tonight. I think with everything here, I do think that we should look at having a neighborhood meeting. I think that is important. I definitely recommend that. I think it would be very, very important. But I think we can move tonight.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion? Yes?
Madam Chair?
Go right ahead.
Before you make the motion, if I could just say, my client and I, we've agreed to have a neighborhood meeting. I know it's a short time frame, but we do have all next week, so we'll try to get some mailings out tomorrow and set a time up for sometime the following week prior to the Board of County Commissioner meeting.
Okay, I think it's just misperception on a lot of people's parts. You know, they don't understand their religion, and religion, we all have many religions, and I think if there's an understanding and what they can have a comfort level and go also and address the environmental issues for the young lady that had those concerns and everything, I think everything else has been answered tonight. So I do hope that you neighbors will allow them to reach out to you so you can better understand as well. Anybody like to make the motion?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. O'Dell.
I'd like to make a motion to, to approve for the zoning change. After considering the testimony presented during the public hearing, including staff comments, I hereby move that the Planning and Zoning Commission of St. Lucie County recommend that the St. Lucie County Board of County Commissioners approve the petition of Adele Nefzi for a change in zoning from the AR Agricultural Residential Zoning District to the I Institutional Zoning District, because the proposed change in zoning is consistent with the existing and proposed use of property in the surrounding area, and this petition conforms to the standards of review as set forth in Section 11.06.03 of the St. Lucie County Land Development Code, and the petition is not in conflict with the goals, objectives, and policies of the St. Lucie County Comprehensive Plan. Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Mott?
I'd like to second and offer an amendment that this be for a cemetery only. There's no objection.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Mott, this motion relates to the zoning only, and you wouldn't be able to limit that. There are no conditions on the rezoning. You can add the conditions to the second petition for the conditional use.
All right, I'll offer that secondly then. I second the motion.
Okay, any discussion? Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Mr. Regis?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lowndes?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Townsend?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Munt?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. O'Dell?
Yes, ma'am.
On to item J.
If I could just interject, if you want to just briefly open and see if there's anyone that has anything else to add, and then close the public hearing on this one and take a vote.
For item up number J?
Yes.
Okay.
Ma'am.
We're going to open the public comment. Is there anybody that would like to come forward and speak on this item?
I want to thank all the board members and all the staff, and I assure you, we won't let you down, including the neighbors. There was a mistake. We agree. Some of us agree. It was not done properly. It was the gentleman's fault. He agreed to. He owned it. I was not told. So I guarantee you that none of these people sitting haven't been stopped by police ever. So there's no question from Mr. Munn's mind that what type of people we are. I tell you, I work with youth 40 years in this community, and I've seen the people become doctors, the hospital too, pharmacists, my people, and we work together in the community. So the chairman sitting here, she can vouch that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to say something?
So for our neighbors and on behalf of our community, please accept our apology for not asking for a meeting. Please accept it.
On the maintenance.
Excuse me, I need you to state your name,
Roberto
please.
Rivas,
Thank you.
3191 Daniel Street. On the maintenance, on the outside, they're going to take over too? Or like the building out there with the hot, on the south side, they're supposed to take care of the outside, and you go through there on Christensen, that wall inside might be good, but the outside, trees growing against the wall on that south side of the building, of this property, where they that alcoholics and all that people live back there in the back. I don't know what. Anyway, they're supposed to be taking care of that right away, and they haven't even took care of it. I mean, it's all grown. So are they going to let it do the same thing?
Can staff answer?
On this wall?
Does staff want to respond to that, or I will?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the property just to the south that hasn't maintained their wall.
Right.
And, as we've heard, they will be responsible to maintain the vegetation outside that wall. That would be a violation of once we get the site plan, if that did occur, and code enforcement could take care of that.
Well, because they said the same thing about that wall, that building they put out there a long time ago, that it was supposed to take care of it.
Right.
Excuse me, sir, can I have you talk into the mic?
Code enforcement?
Well, I haven't called nobody or nothing, but
Okay.
if that's the law, they're supposed to take care of it. I figured that they would take care of it.
Okay, we can look into that. And there's the director of the department.
Yeah, Madam Chair, we'll send code enforcement out there and take a look at it. We respond to most code complaints on a complaint basis, and so now that we kind of know that there's an issue, we'll have somebody go out there and have a look.
Just to explain to you, sir, just to make it clear, to clarify, this gentleman does not own the property yet. So it's the thing that you're referring to at this time. Staff will check into having a code officer go out there and look at it. And if they purchase the property, it will be part of the requirements that they will have to maintain that.
Yeah,
and if they don't, then a code enforcement officer will cite them as well.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a comment or? Hearing now, we're going to close the public.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
Madam
Kojak.
Chair, before there's a motion, a point of privilege, I'd like to just, at this point, say to the community and the applicant that there was never a question of character or integrity at any point in this discussion. I think the issue of a cemetery stood on its own merits entirely. And I'd like to assure you that the decisions made up here were made with that spirit. So, thank you. Continue the motion?
Continue with the motion.
Okay. After considering the testimony presented during the public hearing, including staff comments, I hereby move that the Planning and Zoning Commission of St. Lucie County recommend that the St. Lucie County Board of Commissioners approve the petition of Adele Zeffney for a conditional use permit in the I institutional zoning district to allow a private cemetery because the proposed conditional use permit with the conditions therein is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the St. Lucie County Comprehensive Plan and has satisfied the requirements of Section 11.07.03 of the St. Lucie County Land Development Code. With the proposed conditions, the project will not have an adverse effect on properties in the surrounding area.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Do you have something?
Just wanted to make sure that this is the one where condition number 6 needs to be removed. Prior to the issuance of zoning compliance, the developer shall construct Christensen Road to county standards from the project access point to West Midway Road. Just wanted to add that. And then if there's condition about the use as a cemetery as well.
Yeah, and you wanted to add that in there, the condition.
Why are we removing the road construction? The county was going to do that? Is that what I heard? Okay, thank you.
Did you understand that, Ms. Secretary?
Nodded the head, Mr. Pauly. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a second. Any discussion? Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Munt?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lowndes?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Townsend?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Regis?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. O'Dowd?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you can move on to the next step. I would like the neighbors to know that Planning and Zoning Board, we are just an advisory board. At this point, it is very important for you to have the meeting with them, and then the Board of County Commissioners are the one that do make the decision. The Planning and Zoning is just an advisory board. Okay, we removed item A. Can we take 5 minutes? We'll take 5 minutes.
Anybody tuned into the ball game?
We are going to reside and call the meeting back to order. And we are going to start with item B.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You have before you, as you look at your schedule, 7 public hearings on seven separate ordinances, but they all relate to the county's impact fee ordinances, and all, if adopted, would make the same language changes to those ordinances. So with your permission, what I would like to do is make comments for the first public hearing, which is on the road impact fees, and then as you open and close each of the subsequent public hearings, I will make my comments, just ask that my previous comments be incorporated into the record for that public hearing. Of course, if there are any questions that come up as we go through, I'll be happy to try and answer those. So if that's acceptable.
That's acceptable by me.
Okay. As I stated, we have 7 public hearings. The first one is on Ordinance 13-023, dealing with the road impact fee ordinances. Under the current impact fee ordinances, anyone who has paid an impact fee but does not commence construction before the permit is expired is entitled to seek a refund of the fees that have been paid. Currently, however, there's not a time limit in the ordinance on making that claim for a refund. The proposed ordinance would require that the refund request be made within 3 years of the date the permit was issued. The second amendment relates to the refund of impact fees, which are collected by the county but are not expended or encumbered by the end of the calendar quarter immediately following 10 years from the date the impact fees were paid. So in other words, the county collects the money for anticipated projects related to the impact of the project, but does not then go ahead and spend or encumber those monies for a project related to the roads or libraries or whatever it might be. The current language provides for a 6% interest rate on the refunded fee. The amendment would change that to be the CPI interest rate, but not to exceed 3% annually. And I did speak to the OMB director prior to the meeting to get a little bit better understanding for myself how that would be calculated. She said they would look each year during that 10-year period to determine what the CPI, and that they would have the ability to apply that relevant interest rate in calculating how much should be refunded to the permit holder. There was a question prior to the hearings tonight about the effective date for the proposed ordinance. It was our intent and would be our interpretation as drafted that they would only apply to impact fees paid after the effective date of the ordinance. But in order to clarify any questions related to that, I did provide to you a copy of a memorandum that the county attorney had done earlier for the Board of County Commissioners and the county administrator, recommending that we add some language to the effective date provision of the ordinance. And I'll just go ahead and read that. It says, this ordinance shall only apply to impact fees collected after the effective date of this ordinance. So in other words, anything paid going forward would have these provisions applied to them. Permission for tonight's public hearings was granted, to advertise tonight's public hearings was granted by the Board of County Commissioners on May 21st, and the notices were published in the News Tribune on June 7th. Staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward the ordinances to the Board of County Commissioners with a recommendation for adoption, and I will attempt to answer any questions that you all may have.
Okay. Is there any questions from staff?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
My microphone just fell apart, but that's all right. Who is Mr. Wilson that sent this email?
That is Charles Wilson, who is sitting in the audience and I believe just raised his hand.
Okay. Looks like we will probably hear from Mr. Wilson. I have some issues with this. Let me tell you where I'm coming from. Let's see. I guess, why are we using the consumer price index rather than a monetary index? To me, the consumer price index, in trying to set an interest rate that the county's going to pay to somebody at a future date that could be several years down the road, you've got the LIBOR rate, which is the London interchange rate, which is used for loans overnight between banks. You've got the T-bill rates, And where I'm going with this right now is you're talking about potentially the consumer price index could be something over 2%, and there's the chained CPI, which is slightly less than the consumer price index that everybody's been used to for several years, and there's a proposed change that Social Security will start using the chained CPI in the future, which would be a somewhat less growth of CPI in future years. But CPI can run over 2%, and today the interest rates are running less than 1%. LIBOR rates are around less than 20 basis points and less than 40 basis points, and I think T-bill rates are even lower than that. So why we would pay interest of greater than 2% when borrowing money or the money that you can get interest on is much less than even 0.5%. So using some sort of a treasury index made sense to me rather than the CPI on all of these. And the other thing that I thought of was why don't we pay interest to the impact fee in the same way that county funds are invested? If the county investment is returning 0.5% or 1%, that would be the same percentage for that year that we would have accumulated for paying the interest on these impact fees when they're refunded. The other thing is that as I went through, there are different rates of administrative fees. Some are at a 3% administrative rate, and others were at a 4% administrative fee. So I have a question about that. But, I don't want to set this back, but I'd like to know from staff why we use CPI, why we didn't use a monetary index, and should we consider revisiting the entire issue on all of these?
Madam Chairman, Mr. Munt, it's my understanding that was a recommendation from our Office of Management and Budget, but I can certainly speak to them to see if there's another one that they would feel comfortable using, and then if that's the case, present that to the board as an alternative to the CPI. I know we do use the CPI for certain lease calculations for annual rent increases and so forth, but obviously there are many others to choose from, and that's something that we could look at before the Board of County Commissioners hearings.
All right. Well, as I say, to me, using the CPI, it doesn't make sense, and the county receives interest on funds that it holds, and to pay the same rate of interest, which today would be less than the CPI, makes more sense. Why pay 1.5% more than what the county's being returned for those funds that are invested? And I certainly would like. Is anyone here from the OMB?
I don't believe so.
Well, I think they need to be here, and we need more clarification and discussion on this. Now, if we move it forward to the Board of County Commissioners, I personally, am not comfortable with the way this is proposed unless I get a better explanation. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for staff?
Greg, which one was it, 4% and not 3%? Administrative fees.
13-023, 3B.
Let's see.
Oh, that was 6.
Let's see.
I didn't see one at 4.
Yeah. No, there's. Give me a sec. Let's see. Madam Chair, may I?
Go ahead, Mr. Mott.
Let's see, road impact fee ordinance is at 4% retained. The library's impact fee ordinance is at 3% retained. Public buildings impact fee is 3% retained. The parks impact fee is 4% retained. And law enforcement impact fee is 4% retained. Fire protection is 4% retained. Educational facilities is also 4% retained.
Thank you. Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Lowndes.
Ms. Young, can you address the difference in the administrative fees percentage?
I'm sorry, I really can't. And that's not something that we're proposing to change tonight. But I think I don't know why they were set up differently. It may have something to do with, for instance, with the law enforcement. There's other agencies involved besides the county, but I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Well, I don't think it's fair to send the county attorney here with this and not have the OMB people who put this and these calculations together to defend what they have come up with.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would agree with Mr. Munt. I think maybe take all of these back and look at them again and come back when we can have a representative from OMB and research about the CPI, XYZ, ABC. I think there's too many unanswered questions, and I don't feel comfortable passing all of these either.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I would move for a continuance.
Is there a second?
Or move for a continuance also, based on what we've discussed. Is that the correct thing to do, Ms.
If you
Young?
want to, and I hate to be a stickler, but you probably should continue each one separately since each one is a public hearing. Unless you want to read them all at once, all the numbers. But we need to make sure we have on the record all the numbers that are being continued, if that's what you want to do.
Can we not can we continue without opening the public hearings?
I would prefer that you open them. I would assume Mr. Wilson has some comments, or he may wish to defer them to, if you all, the intent is to continue into your July or subsequent meeting.
I would like to hear from Mr. Wilson.
I have no problem with that, but...
Yeah. I mean, it's not like they're all chomping up the bit to come up, but...
Open and close them.
Okay, so are we wanting to go forward with each one of them now, or are we wanting to open and close each one of them and ask for it to be moved? What is the request from the board?
If your intent is to, and Mr. Wilson just wants to speak once versus 7 times, I think he's indicating that's acceptable. You might go ahead and, take his comments on this first one, and then if you wish to just say to continue all of them. But it's just as long as someone reads the numbers into the record for the ordinance, so the secretary will have that.
Okay.
Since we can indicate in the minutes that there was no one else present to speak.
Okay. So is there any other questions for staff or anything? Okay. It being a public hearing, we will open up the public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak?
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioners. I will get you as quickly to the basketball game as I can do. I think I can answer a couple of your questions. First of all, my name is Charles Wilson. My office is at 2001 building on 9th Street in Vero Beach. I represent a company called Impact Fee Consultants, and that's what we do. We talk about impact fees more than I have ever wanted to hear the word impact fee. I had, as you could see from the correspondence, I had strenuous objections to the original concept of going backwards, but in this case, the county attorney's memo has very clearly ended that for what would be a controversy in the future. Just a couple of things as an aside. I think I can answer a couple of your questions for you, if you can take it with a grain of salt or check it with your people if you want to. The first is that administrative fees. Let me say this. The impact fee ordinances for St. Lucie County have a number of conflicts. They have conflicts with state law, statutes. They have conflicts with the interlocal agreements. And there is some cleaning up that probably needs to be done. I don't know if this is the first step of it, or if it's going to be continual, or if you want to do it all at one time. The interest rate, as an example, is in the statute. The Florida statutes 163 that deal with impact fees require that any governmental authority that has an impact fee to pay interest. It does not specify a specific interest. But what most counties do, because it also specifies that these funds are to be held in separate accounts. So these cannot be intermingled with the general fund. They cannot be used for other purposes. They have to be in their separate accounts. Some counties use it for interdepartmental borrowing, but for the most part, it has to be in a separate account. And as such, if that money is invested, the money invested actually is supposed to go back into that fund. So the amount of interest that is paid, that you, for instance, Indian River County, their regulations say interest will be paid at the same rate as the interest in which is earned on that account. So it ties, it's not supposed to be a profit center. So it ties the interest paid to what the interest is earned, and when the clerk of courts invests it, say, in the Florida fund, it's at whatever rate that is that he invested in the Florida fund. That's just kind of a piece of information for you. The second issue that you have are the administrative fees. The difficulties, one of the difficulties you have is that you have interlocal agreements, and in some of those interlocal agreements, the administrative fees are specified by the City of Port St. Lucie or the City of Fort Pierce. And in some cases, what you're trying to do is mirror those. And in some cases, your impact fees that you have in Port St. Lucie are different than the ones that you have in Fort Pierce. And that's why you get some differences in the fees that are charged, for instance, like with the fire board and some of the other. That also is problematic in that the state statute requires that administrative fees be limited to cost. The county, it is the burden of proof that the county has to prove that it costs that much. I'm not so sure that the proof that the county could prove that 4% of $80,000 that it costs them that much to account for that money. If you have an $80,000 refund, and in one case we had a refund, we have secured about $3 million in refunds to over 1,000 people. And in one case, that refund was $810,000 at 6% interest. So I understand why you'd want to change the interest rate, because since the time these were passed, you're racking up right now, you're racking up some bills because you're paying under that interest rate since 2005. So you may want to do something to change that interest rate. Especially on impact fees. There are two kinds of impact fees. Impact fee, we call them impact fee A and impact fee B. Impact fee A is a non-commencement impact fee B. Impact fee B is one that has expired. Now, you can make this change as requested by especially with them taking out the retroactive. If it was retroactive, you'd be in court in 5 minutes. So I'm glad to see that that was clarified so that there's no question, even so that the city can't later on come back and say, well, that's not what it says. So this additional language really does help clarify that particular issue. And you can pass any kind of rule that you want to, but it is ultimately responsible to the court. Because the court, when they establish impact fees, establish certain criterion, and frankly, St. Lucie County is already running up against whether it can prove that criteria. And that is, most specifically, the court said that it has to be used in something called the dual rational nexus test. And that means that it has to be applied directly. It's a fee. It's not a tax. And it's like if I pay a fee to get a hunting license, it's not a fee in case I hunt. It's a fee for me hunting. And the impact fee is the same thing. It is not a fee in case you might do something. It is a fee that you are doing something, that you have an impact. It has to be directly related to you. And in some of the cases, 6 years is what the court said that is acceptable as a reasonable time. Now, they did not say that 10 years was an unreasonable time. They just said, when asked the question to clarify what a reasonable time to spend this money in, the court's answer was 6 years. 10 years has never been tested. And in the As the economy goes south, more and more governments wanted longer time to be able to spend their money. But again, the statutes are about how it's used compared to who paid it. It's not giving the county more time to spend it. It has to, if I build a house, it has to be the cause that I'm making, the change that I'm making. And I'll give you one example, and that is that some counties take the impact fee at CO, because that's when the impact is. Some counties elect to take that money early at permit. Now, the downside of that is when you take the money at permit and somebody doesn't go to CO, you have to give the money back. Because you don't, if I don't build a house, if I buy a permit from you and pay you $10,000 and I don't build a house, I can't go to a school. And I can't go to a library, and I can't come here to this public building. So when all is said and done, all these rules that you're making and passing will be challenged eventually in a court. Now, as far as the ones that have been presented to you, these are presented as a result, I believe, and I think they would concur, as a result of our inquiries. So we started making inquiries in October of 2012. And after several months of trying to get the data together, it was pretty clear what we were trying to do. We've already identified some $300,000 in refunds that we believe are due public. And this is the first of what we expect to be a series of reactions to those inquiries of people who have refunds coming to them. That was the contract they made with the county. The county agreed. The counties had their money. And now what's going to happen is, as people come back and ask for their money back, which they have every right to do, we're going to start trying to make changes to limit their ability to get this money back. And that's what this is. This is the first step of this. I want to thank them for not trying to do it retroactively. That would have been pretty rough. But it does make sense, frankly, to put some sort of limit on it, because I think you established the impact fees, Heather, what, in 1985 or something?
Somewhere in the 80s.
Okay. You theoretically could be paying somebody from 1985. All right. So you have a number of problems, and it's going to start showing up now because, frankly, because I've stirred this nest. And but I can tell you, it's millions of dollars. And this first series of changes are just going to be that. That's your first series of changes. Now, we've offered, and you've had some wonderful people, Ms. Mayer in Finance, Ms. Graziosi in Building, Bill Nye in IT, and especially Carol Bishop, is that her name, in the legal office, have been just tremendous. They're wonderful public servants, and they've really been helpful. We have agreed to sit down and try to help clear up some of these problems. We haven't had much response there. So far, the planning department isn't particularly interested in what we have to say. I hope maybe that'll change when it starts going forward. But as far as this is concerned, sir, you can change the payment of the interest because it is in a segregated account, and it will be really quite easy to find how much you're earning on that money. The administrative fee, frankly, is determined through a work study that other counties have had to do when anybody challenged their and most other counties are 2.5% or 3%. Frankly, 4 is the highest I've ever run into. There could be more, but 4 is the highest I've ever run into. So you'd have a hard time because you also charge 4% to do the refund. So if you have an $80,000 refund, you're charging someone $3,200 to write them a check for the money that they paid to you. Okay, so this is just the first in what's going to be a long series of changes that will probably come up, probably as a result as we get closer and we start making claims and they start getting either approved or denied. So do with as you wish. I have no objection to this 3-year, because frankly the court's going to decide on it. My main objection is to retroactively do it. You can't do it. I mean, you just can't do that. So you would be disenfranchising hundreds of people who've who have rights in the United States still, but barely. And so I don't know if there's any questions I can answer for you, but that is true for all of your the fees as you go through them.
Does the board have any? Thank you very much. Does the board have
Madam
any
Chair?
questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Wilson. I appreciate your attendance and your comments tonight, and it's added some clarification. We really do need our OMB people here, and as I said, I would feel more comfortable with some changes the way we're approaching this in its entirety. The other question I have is, Ms. Young, these various accounts, they are segregated, as Mr. Wilson pointed out. Are those managed by the county, or is that by the county clerk?
Well, and that Mr. Satterley might be able to answer the question. I'm sorry, Mark, I know you just walked back in, but as I understand, his question was whether the clerk manages the segregated impact fee accounts once we receive the funds.
We collect the fees at building permit, and then the funds are handled by the finance department, which is a function of the county clerk.
Yeah, they serve as the county's finance director, finance office. So.
All right. Well, then I would suggest that when we have the next meeting, that the county clerk be here for some discussion about the fees and the percentages and that sort of thing, if they are in fact managing those dollars.
Yeah, I mean, it's they work with the different funds into which the monies are deposited, and allocate them to the projects to which
Well, there are some differing amounts. There's 3% and there's 4%, and I don't want to ask OMB a question about it, and then they say, well, that's managed by the clerk of the court's office.
Now we'll have OMB come.
And the clerk, please, or someone from his staff.
Okay, we're going to close the public hearing.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Lowndes.
I would move that we postpone. Is that
continue?
Continue.
Continue to a date certain. I believe the July meeting is the 18th. I don't see our little calendars.
18th.
Ms. Young, you need to have each ordinance read into the minutes.
If you would I'm sorry, but yes, if you would, just read the numbers. You just go through them.
Ordinance number 13-025, ordinance number 13-0-26.
I think you also had 23 and 24.
I haven't gotten there yet.
I'm sorry.
Ordinance 13-024, ordinance 13-023. Is that it?
There's a 13-027.
27, 28, and 29.
Correct. Thank you.
Second.
And that would be continued to July 18th at 6 p.m. or soon thereafter, as may be heard.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Mott.
Mr. Satterley, does your department have enough coming forward that we're justifying a July meeting?
Yeah, according to Ms. Olson, there will be a July meeting.
Okay.
Any discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. O'Dell?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Regis?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mund?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Townsend?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Morgan?
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Lowndes?
Yes, ma'am.
You're doing fine.
Okay, is there any other business?
Madam Chair, I have a comment or a suggestion, and I think this was done, again, years and years ago. Mr. Satterley, when doing the agendas, is there any way, please, of putting items like we moved up the item tonight, Christensen Road, the changes up, because I think it's fair for the community to go first instead of all of the text changes, because it gives a false impression that they think they could probably get here about 6:30 or 7, and I know it's advertised at 6 p.m. or soon thereafter, but I think it's only fair that if it's something to do with the community and public comment, that it be first on the agenda and leave the business towards the end of the agenda?
Yeah, and that's the way it typically is, but for reasons that Leslie can probably explain, just the timing of the way the agenda was set up and the materials as they got produced, it just ended up that the cemetery item ended up being last, and but typically it would be first.
Thank you.
That's correct. We already had the rest of the items all printed and ready to go, and all 4 million copies copied. And so we didn't want to have to recopy, kill a couple more trees. So that's why we did it that way this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business? Motion to adjourn.
Go Heat.
Greg, you want to talk about this tomorrow morning?